political organizing in that traditional sense. Let's take performance art. Let's take artists in general. There's a tremendous movement among Chicana feminists in revisioning the Virgin of Guadalupe. They've done magnificent work. And they have opened her up in a certain kind of way. So there are traditional images of La Virgen, and then there's non-traditional images of La Virgen. So I want to tell you a little story about one. So there's an artist named Alma Lopez. And she painted something called Our Lady. So Our Lady is another term for the Virgin of Guadalupe or La Virgen. It was a source of tremendous controversy when it was shown on display in a museum in New Mexico. Because the depiction was of the Virgin dressed, it was a model, and the model was wearing a bikini. And if you look more closely at the painting, you see how beautiful and truly respectful it is. And you see the cape that's associated with La Virgen, the blue cape. And you see Juan Diego, who is always, if you've seen pictures of La Virgen, he's always underneath, and there's the crescent moon. And Juan Diego is in the story is the one who discovered La Virgen and went to the bishop in Mexico City and said, this is the Virgin. It was the Virgin Mary, brown skin, and located on the same site as Tonantzin, who was very important in indigenous culture as a goddess. So merging of cultures. So it's all of that is represented in the painting, but she's in a bikini, so she doesn't look like a traditional vegan, a traditional virgin. And her face is up, and her eyes are open. In the traditional, usually the face is down. But there were roses, because roses are very symbolic of loving things. So all of that is in the painting. And it's important to observe here, after the controversy happened, and there were all these newspaper accounts and so forth, the model for it, who was a woman named Raquel Salinas, explained that she saw herself as part of a feminist intervention to help her heal from a rape she had suffered at the age of 18. And that was why she had wanted to pose for this painting by Alma Lopez. So one might say here that Raquel Salinas sees herself both as the Virgin, since she is posing for that in this painting, but also embraced by the Virgin of Guadalupe as a moment of unconditional love and healing, both things simultaneously. This is very emblematic of the kind of work that many Chicana feminist artists are doing. And there's many others I could describe to you. Now, then some wonderful works, also by Judy Chicago, who's a feminist artist from the 70s, 80s, who used her work in a very activist way. And most of you, have any of you heard of her? Judy Chicago, dinner party? Yes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just a few people? So I'm going to tell you just a little bit, because it's an activist form of art, what she was doing. You walk into a room, a very large room, and there is a setting for a dinner party. And it's in the shape of a triangle. And there are 39 place settings. And each place setting contains a hand-painted china plate. And each setting was intended to pay homage to a woman of outstanding achievement in Western civilization. Each china plate rested on a hand-woven needlepoint runner that represented the actual needlepoint of the period in which the woman lived. And on the runner was also narrated the significance of that woman's life and work. Then you had the table in the form of this equilateral triangle, and the triangle being an ancient symbol of the feminine. The table rested on what was called the heritage floor, So it's white porcelain or white tile. And on the floor were the names of, there were 2,300 hand-painted porcelain tiles on which were inscribed the names of 999 women. The names appeared and disappeared as one walked the periphery of the exhibit, illustrating the erasure and recovery of women's history. The most striking aspect of the dinner party are its china plates, displaying endless variations on a butterfly motif in brilliant colors. Now, Chicago says that she chose the butterfly as a symbol of transition and change. Most viewers, however, looked at the butterflies and saw vaginas. Before Eve Ensler did the vagina monologues by a lot of years. Here, as many felt, were the female genitalia shrouded in centuries of defilement, open and inviting and radiating colors, and sometimes even given the illusion of a wet and sumptuous warmth. Upon its completion, Chicago commented that creating a dinner party was, quote, like building a cathedral, with each person giving a brick. 90,000 people, 75% of whom were women, stood in line for as long as 5 hours to see the exhibit during its 12-week run at the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco. It was the largest crowd in the museum's history, 90,000 people in 1979 during that 12-week period. Now, it was received with great consternation by art critics for various reasons, one of whom declared that he didn't like the excursion into vaginal politics. To which my private rejoinder is, has anyone ever seen the Washington Monument? The blinking red lights. You know, like, what's the problem? Well, after its opening, it was so controversial in the 80s that she couldn't get it exhibited. And so it was basically crated and the exhibit was gone, which is why you haven't seen it and haven't heard of it. But very recently, a very wealthy woman in New York funded the building of a feminist art museum attached to the Brooklyn Museum, which is on Eastern Parkway in New York City, in Brooklyn, if you get to Brooklyn somehow. Which I recommend, it's a terrific city. Anyway, you will see this exhibit because it is now on permanent display. And it's an amazing thing to see. So it has this historic quality to it, but it was also transformative in terms of the art world, but also in terms of feminist consciousness and in terms of ideas about art. And you see the same thing today. When we do, you see, for example, certain kinds of hip-hop artists, certain kinds of spoken word artists, certain kinds of dancing and choreography that go on today. Rainbow theater, I think of those as social movements, seeking social change by educating and raising consciousness around a variety of issues. And I've heard some spoken word that is absolutely incredible. And it's so fast, boy, you have to pay attention. You can't space out. You have to be right there the whole time, am I right? Now I'm going like this because I was telling my TAs this morning, I was giving a talk in Berkeley about a year ago, and the students started going like this, and I thought they were telling me to hurry up and end, and I didn't know that this was a symbol for applause. Times change.
Yeah.
Poetry
I can't snap my fingers though.
Poetry is a form of social action. Here's this wonderful poem by Alice Walker. That's why I read your poems all quarter, right? I read your poetry all quarter. This is by Alice Walker.